Hello and welcome to the El Paso County Comprehensive Master Plan presentation of the Place Types Land Use Plan Overview. This presentation is meant to provide a brief overview of the place type land planning approach being utilized for the El Paso County Comprehensive Plan titled Your El Paso Master Plan. The Master Plan is a 20-year guide for the county to help guide, manage, and direct growth and development of the county over the next couple of decades. This presentation will provide an introduction to the plan and the approach. It will provide an overview of the place-based planning approach. We will review the draft place types for the El Paso County Master Plan, and I will provide direction on how to provide input to the planning process and feedback for the preliminary place types by using an online questionnaire and utilizing map.social, an online mapping tool to actually map your comments to a map of El Paso County. I'd like to start with an overview of the place-based planning approach and what exactly is place-based planning and the place type. First, El Paso County is a very large study area. The area of the county is approximately and over 2,100 square miles. Large study areas such as this make land use and development decision making on a parcel by parcel basis very difficult. Smaller study areas or cities will often do land planning on a parcel by parcel basis, but planning for the scale of El Paso County requires a larger scaled approach that is not parcel by parcel specific. Development decisions within El Paso County are typically made at a planned development scale. That is representative of a larger area of land being proposed for development, and within that larger area, several different types of land use may exist. Small infill projects that may occur within the county typically reflect adjacent development within the county that already exists. Place types as a planning approach focuses on several key factors. The place types approach focuses on guiding desired character and intensity, basically what type of development we would like to see where. We define the collective mix in uses and block patterns. What types of uses would we likely see in an area? And if a neighborhood is being built, what do those blocks look like? What are the patterns we would likely see as an area becomes developed? We begin to define the land uses and the development palette for all areas. And it addresses the form and sense of place. How big are buildings? How tall are buildings? What was the place like if we were to experience it once it was developed? Is it a neighborhood? Is it a commercial place? Is it a park? Is it a place for industry and commerce? We had to address the form, the use, the character, and the sense of place throughout the county as it develops over the next 20 years. The place-based approach to planning, which this plan is embracing, provides flexibility in development and the design approach. It enables the comprehensive plan to address very complex issues at a neighborhood scale, as opposed to trying to address every issue for every single parcel, which is not possible at the scale of the county. So this plan enables the county to address things at a neighborhood or a larger scale. And finally, it allows the plan to be more easily translated into zoning. The county has the ability to use zoning to help guide the appropriate development over the next couple of decades. This plan, once adopted, will be a great tool to inform county zoning so that the planning of the comprehensive plan and the zoning of the county dovetail and mutually support one another to ensure appropriate development for El Paso County. Let's first take a look at an example of what we would call a place type. And we're going to use an example of what would be a typical neighborhood to explain the place type approach. So let's say we have a typical neighborhood, and that is a place type within the county. A typical neighborhood might have single-family homes as the predominant feature or the predominant land use in the neighborhood. But in addition to single-family homes, you might see townhomes or row houses or apartment buildings in this area, but it may be at the end of the blocks or lining a perimeter street or a major corridor. You might also see in this neighborhood a small local retail shop or service area, not providing retail for a big, huge, large area, but to service primarily the local needs and services of the adjacent residential neighborhood, typically located along a major street or a key crossroads within the neighborhood. Blocks within a typical neighborhood are generally laid out in a similar pattern with intersection spacing, parking, are there going to be sidewalks or no sidewalks? These are things that typically are consistent within each neighborhood, although they may differ from neighborhood to neighborhood. And then finally, other types of uses that you would see in a neighborhood include schools, small parks, religious institutions, and other sorts of uses that you would see sprinkled into what would be called a typical neighborhood. So let's take a look at what could be classified as a typical neighborhood or a typical neighborhood place type. So if you look at the photograph on the screen right now, this could be reflective of what some would think of as a typical neighborhood. Let's take a look at this typical neighborhood. The predominant use is single-family detached homes. By area, it is predominantly, overwhelmingly, single-family detached residential. However, in certain areas, like those highlighted in orange on the screen right now, this is an area that could accommodate apartment buildings or townhomes or row houses along the edge of the neighborhood, along a major busy street within the neighborhood. Other uses you would likely see in a typical neighborhood include schools. They could be elementary schools, middle schools, or high schools. They could be private schools, they could be public schools, they could be trade schools, but it is very typical to see institutional uses such as schools within a residential neighborhood. Lastly is the commercial uses. Commercial uses in typical neighborhoods are typically on the edge of the neighborhood, typically at key intersections, and typically on major roadways or main streets. These are not intended to be commercial draws from across the larger county area or region, but primarily intended to meet the daily goods, services, and shopping needs of the adjacent residential area. And again, collectively, all these different types of land uses work together to form the typical neighborhood place type. So the place type again would be a typical neighborhood. Before we get into the review of the preliminary draft place types for El Paso County Master Plan, I want to talk about the notion of conservation design. El Paso County is characterized as having absolutely beautiful and important natural features and resources, environmental areas that lead to the character and attractiveness of the county. It is crucial that these areas, steep slopes, water areas, recharge areas, heavily wooded or forested areas, and other environmental features be preserved and protected. The notion of conservation design is an approach to ensuring these features stay protected as development occurs. Conservation design is a neighborhood design approach that preserves areas of open space and natural features. Residential densities or development densities can be neutral across an area as conservation design is utilized. Utilization of conservation design can promote a broader housing diversity while preserving open space at the same time. And it minimizes the infrastructure need necessary to service development in a key area. And the key thing is that conservation design is an approach to preserve and to protect open space and environmental features, and it is applicable and should be applied to all areas of the county and all types of development and all place types. This example explains a little bit about conservation design very quickly. On the far left, you have a conventional development, 18 residential lots, you have steep terrain, you have a creek, you have wooded areas. And in conventional development, it's all subdivided, 18 lots, all privately held, no protected open space. 80,000 square foot lots, about 2 acres. The middle example, those 18 lots are carried over, but they're reduced in size. And 50% of this land area is now protected as open space. It protects the creek, it protects the steep terrain and the slopes, it protects a lot of the open space and the wooded conservation areas. In the far right example, the density is actually increased from the original 18 lots to 24 lots. But now 60% of the area is protected as natural open space. So this is an example of how conservation design can be utilized in any area to still accommodate appropriate and desirable development, but to ensure that natural features and environmentally valued assets are protected. So an example is conservation design, as you see here, steep slopes, watered areas, valuable prairie land, and other sorts of features can be protected as development occurs. Here you see a naturalized area adjacent to a waterway with mature stands of trees with a trail going through here, and this is a protected area, as opposed to just chopping this up into single-family residential. The residential exists to the right of this. Other areas, even including research parks or business parks, the undulating terrain, the low-lying water areas, the different types of native vegetation can be protected through design while still accommodating development. So this notion of conservation design should be employed throughout the county. The next thing I'd like to do is quickly run through the draft place types that we are proposing for El Paso County. I'm going to be going through these fairly quickly as an orientation or an introduction. At the end of this, I will direct you to where you can find out more information that you can pull up and read at your leisure to have more time to digest what I'm going through, as well as additional information related to transportation, built form, and how to transition from these areas from one to another. Now let's talk about the draft place types that are being proposed. Preliminary place types draw from existing unique places in El Paso County. We're not just making things up or pulling them out of thin air. These are areas that are reflective of existing areas within the county and the desired type of development the county will need to accommodate as we absorb the growth of a couple 100,000 people or more over the next 20 to 30 years. It's the basis for desired future development, and it defines how existing places can become better versions of themselves. The place types being proposed are rural, large lot residential, suburban residential, urban residential, rural center, regional center, employment center, regional open space, mountain interface, military, utility, and incorporated areas. Place types are organized by purpose statement, character description, and character images, and a locator map showing what areas of the county are this type of place type. We talk about development considerations, transportation and infrastructure, built form, transition to other place types, and function of supporting uses. This will be in a document that I will refer to you at the end. This presentation will talk about the primary land uses and the supporting land uses. We are also working on developing 3D models of the place types, which are not available yet, but will be shortly. This very quickly, and again, you'll be able to look at this at your leisure in another document I will refer you to, shows how the place types are on the left side column, and across the top are the different types of land uses people are most accustomed to: single family detached, single family attached, multifamily, restaurant, commercial retail, entertainment and arts district, office development, light industrial, and how these uses begin to filter into the place types. And this is what we're going to go over right now. This is a place type map of El Paso County and shows all the place types and their location within El Paso County. And again, at the end of this presentation, I will direct you to map.social, where you can actually go in and drop your comments on this draft map, letting us know where you agree and where you may disagree or have suggestions or thoughts. The first one is the rural place type. And as you can see by the map, the red area is what we have proposed as a rural place type. And it is primarily the eastern portion of the county with a few other pockets over on the western edge. Rural is a defining characteristic of El Paso County, and the preservation of this is a key to ensuring the integrity of the water supply and sustainable growth of the county. These areas designated for rural place type are largely agricultural uses and estate residential on minimum 5-acre lots, primarily isolated homes, and they're really not developed neighborhoods. These areas are generally remotely located, and the idea is to prohibit leapfrog development, meaning we don't want someone to jump out into these areas and start building traditional neighborhoods in these areas that are defined as being rural and estate residential. These rural areas, the primary land uses are agriculture, parks and open space, and farm homestead residential. Supporting land uses that you may see in these areas include estate residential with a minimum of 5-acre lots, and maybe some institutional uses that you might see some government facilities out in these areas. But these photographs give you a good idea of the types of development we would anticipate seeing in the rural place type areas. And again, this is primarily the eastern portion of the county, with a few sporadic areas over on the western edge of the county. Next up is large lot residential. And you can see by the map, these areas are primarily scattered along the north and northeast portions of the county a little bit closer into the developed areas, with a little bit to the north, a little bit to the west, and an area further down to the south. Large lot residential areas supports the rural character of the county while providing for unique and desirable neighborhoods. These are predominantly single-family detached areas on lots of 2.5 acres or more. It serves as a transition between the rural and suburban residential. The areas closer into the city are more suburban. The areas further out, as in the previous place type, are designated for rural. These areas, these large lot residential areas, really preserve a rural character, even though they are large lot residential. And they really maintain a sense of community. So they are not developed subdivisions, but they each have their own sense of rural character and their own sense of community. Different parts of the county have very unique characteristics and take into consideration some key areas. So while there are lots of large lot residential areas, they very much differ from one another. The primary land uses in these areas are single-family detached residential, typically on lots 2.5 acres or larger. Supporting land uses that you may see in these areas include parks and open space, limited commercial, like maybe a small service type of a use serving the area at a key intersection, or commercial service uses in the same thing, very limited, but you may see them in the outskirts of these areas to support some of these residential areas. But again, the photographs give you a good sense of what these areas are like. Next up is suburban residential. These areas are again beginning to get closer and closer to the developed areas of the county. These areas are traditional residential neighborhoods with supporting commercial uses at key intersections, predominantly single-family detached, but with limited single-family attached and multifamily. So we're beginning to see a slightly higher density of residential in these areas defined in the red. They're typically a curvilinear street pattern is very common, with shared utilities running up and down throughout all these developments. These areas generally match the municipal suburban development pattern. Suburban residential areas' primary land uses are single-family detached residential. Units range from anywhere from 2.5 acres down to about 20,000 square feet, or 10,000 square feet, excuse me. And you can see here the wide range of different types of development that you would see in a suburban residential area. These areas have supporting land uses such as single-family attached, like townhomes, multifamily residentials, like condominiums and apartments, parks and open space, and then in certain key locations, commercial, retail, and commercial service uses to service the needs of residents, and institutional uses such as schools or other facilities to service the populations. Next up is urban residential. Now we're getting into those areas or pockets nestled right into the municipality of Colorado Springs and surrounding areas. So we're getting more centralized within the county. These areas are opportunities for El Paso County to redefine its growth areas through highly desirable, connected, and complete neighborhoods with a mix of housing products and densities. These are not areas further out or even on the fringe of development. These are areas nestled right in to the developed areas of the county. These provide a mix of densities and housing types with complete residential neighborhoods, bikeable, walkable, and very well connected through every mode of transportation. These neighborhoods provide neighborhood commercial and mixed uses on main thoroughfares or on perimeter streets. The primary land uses in these urban residential areas include single-family detached residential and single-family attached and multifamily. So homes, apartments, condominiums, townhomes, you may see all of these mixed into these areas. Supporting land uses could be used mixed-use development, restaurants, commercial retail, commercial service, institutional uses, parks, and offices. So again, these are very urban residential areas. The next area we're calling a rural center. And you can see these in the map as these red areas that are scattered primarily as we begin to extend northeast of the central developed areas. These provide rural residents vital access to good services and public facilities and serve as a cultural anchor for the community in these further out locations. These rural centers function as the heart of these rural areas. Their compact mix of commercial and institutional uses in these specific locations. They are located along very big thoroughfares or main streets, and they are primarily auto-oriented, but these are sort of little enclaves that serve much larger rural areas. These rural centers provide primary land uses of single-family detached, restaurant, commercial retail, commercial service, and institutional uses. Supporting land uses include single-family attached and multifamily residential. Again, these are crucial rural centers that provide goods, services, and facilities to the larger outlying rural areas of the county. Next up is what we're calling regional centers. And if you look at where these are located, they're on major thoroughfares and they are much closer into higher traffic volumes and a little bit closer to the developed areas of the county. These are commercial destinations for county residents to purchase goods, procure services, and enjoy a variety of entertainment options. These are fairly densely developed areas. They are necessary and desired commercial uses for shopping and service. They serve patrons from all across the county who drive here for these goods and services and entertainment uses. They are easily accessible and being located on major roadways, and they have high year-round activity in the county. The primary land uses in these heavily developed regional centers include restaurants, commercial retail, commercial service, entertainment, and multifamily residential clusters. Supporting uses also include office, institutional, and some single-family attached residential. Again, these are centers of regional nature, drawing people, visitors, and consumers from across the county to these key regional centers on major corridor locations. Next up are employment centers, and you can see these are very large areas primarily on the outskirts of the traditionally developed municipal core of the county. The county's primary location for large-scale, non-retail businesses that provide strong employment opportunities and economic development for the county. These provide spaces for large-scale employers to establish and expand in the county as a key employment base. They are located on or directly adjacent to major highways, and they mitigate potential negative impacts to any adjacent use areas. So while these can be fairly major development areas with pretty intense activity, they need to be they need to mitigate the negative impacts on areas that may be nearby. The primary land uses in these employment centers include light industrial uses, heavy industrial uses, office and business parks. Major employment uses is what these are. Supporting uses are commercial retail, commercial service, and restaurant, primarily to service the employers and employees that work in these areas, as opposed to retail or commercial service that is located in or adjacent to residential neighborhoods serving residents. These are primarily located here to service employees. Next up is regional open space. And this is not every park that exists in the county. There are lots of parks. When you get into the municipal areas, there are several parks. These are abundant natural open spaces that exist in the county for preservation and protection of regionally designated open space. They are entirely natural land and developed parks both. It includes city, county, state, and federally managed lands. This will drive development in adjacent areas as these areas are protected as open space, whether it's active or passive or natural. The attractiveness of these protected areas drives the desirability of areas around them. It excludes smaller open space areas and small neighborhood parks. These are the larger scale regional open spaces throughout the county. The primary land uses very simply are parks, open space, natural areas, and paleontological areas throughout the county. And you can see here several photos of some of the ones that exist. Next up is the mountain interface. This is the sloped areas and the sort of the front range area along the western edge of the county. Preserves the integrity of the mountainous eastern foothills areas of the front range while addressing the needs of existing residents that currently occupy many of these areas. All areas on or directly adjacent to the eastern slope area of the front range. These areas maintain natural beauty and protect wildlife habitats and manage additional development to protect this unique environmental area of the county. Primary land uses in these areas include parks and open space, natural areas, and paleontological areas. Supporting land uses that you may also see in these areas where appropriate: single-family detached residence, some neighborhood commercial, some tourism commercial, arts and entertainment, and some institutional public facilities scattered throughout these areas appropriately. Next up is military. As a place type, the military provides a very important role in El Paso County, both in terms of the land area, the development pattern, and the employment these key features bring to the county. Supporting the growth and advancement of the county's military installations is critical to the county's own success. These areas include the installations and the supporting adjacent uses, ensure compatibility for existing installations and any future expansion of these installations and the surrounding areas. Primary land uses are military operations, office, light industrial, and multifamily residential for base employees and base residents. Supporting land uses include single-family detached residential, single-family attached residential, commercial retail and service, entertainment, and institutional. These are unique and very important components of the county and are significant contributors to the quality of life and economy of the county and sense of place. And the military place type is very distinct within the county. Next up is utility. As a place type, there are a few key areas. These outline the location of unique function of large-scale utility facilities in El Paso County. These include facilities such as landfills, power plants, water treatment facilities, and water reservoirs. They are often located adjacent to large, uninhabited areas of the county. An expansive open space serves as a buffer from these areas to most other place types, as you can see in the photograph above and in the map to the right. The primary land uses for these types of utility areas are landfills, power plants, water reservoirs and treatment facilities, wastewater treatment facilities, and supporting land uses include storage facilities and open space. These are key areas in the county. They are necessary. They are somewhat incompatible and therefore are located in much more remote locations. Transitions from utility areas. Buffering is adjacent to place types by long distances. Where space is permitted, facilities are screened, and function of supporting uses, open space acts as a natural buffer with these areas to other areas of the county. Lastly is the incorporated areas. The El Paso County Master Plan will not be going into these areas to plan for them, as each of these municipalities have their own comprehensive plan governing their own jurisdictions. The areas of the county that you see in red on the map are all incorporated municipalities and not governed by the decisions and not governed by the place types of El Paso County Master Plan. So again, this is a very quick overview. I know it is a lot to take in. It is meant to serve as an introduction to the place types approach and how we plan on planning for the El Paso County Comprehensive Plan to take shape and to guide development over the next 20 years. What you can do below this video screen, below this animation that you've seen for the PowerPoint presentation, you will see 3 different tabs. You will see a tab for an overview document for the place types. You can click on that PDF. You can see a version of the presentation I gave with even more information than what I was able to go over. The additional information contained in the document below also provides information on transportation networks anticipated for each place type, how each place type transitions to other place types that may be adjacent, and what the built form of these areas might look like, what the buildings and streets and other things may look like in these areas as they develop. That's contained below in the document, which is an overview document below this screen. Also below the screen is a button or an icon that you can click on to take a questionnaire or a survey about the place types, and we'll ask you your opinion or your thoughts about each one of the place types that I mentioned. Again, you can review this video or you can review the document below. Also provided below is a link to map.social. If you click on the map.social link, you will be brought to a map of the county, and that map will be an interactive map of the county showing you the place type mapping of the entire county. You can zoom in, zoom out, pan around, just like you're used to doing on Google Maps or other types of mapping software. And as you zoom in, you can use your cursor to drop icons and leave comments. I disagree with this. I agree with that. Have you guys thought about this place type? I like the location of this place type. But you can comment on the map and we will get all this feedback. So again, at a time when we are trying to reach everybody out in the county, where limitations to public gatherings are in place, we are utilizing the ability through virtual gatherings So through this presentation, hopefully you have an introduction into the place type approach. Over the next month or two, additional videos will be produced, additional documents will be produced, and additional questionnaires and mapping opportunities will be produced for you to continue to provide feedback and review what we are working on. Over the next couple months, as these things are unrolled and we've gotten feedback, will allow us to make revisions and to recalibrate things as necessary. And then when we get feedback from the county, we will be able to have another series of outreach and engagement, hopefully in person, face to face, where you can come out, ask us questions, participate in presentations to keep the comprehensive plan moving forward. So thank you very much. Use the links below and please continue to participate. Thank you.